Hi, I'm Adrian Strittmatter. Welcome to Bricks and More. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Centis, a global creative consultancy specializing in destinations, real estate, and the hospitality sector. Bricks and More is all about exploring how to generate, unlock, and maximize real estate value. Our mission is to challenge outdated and limiting notions of how this is done. In each episode, we talk to top professionals to uncover innovative strategies that drive short, medium, and long-term gains. So if you're passionate about making real estate more valuable for more people, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bricks and More. How do you design to create real estate value long before a building exists? Today on Bricks and More, we're diving into the world of architecture, not as drawings or facades, but as strategy, problem solving, and one of the most powerful value creators in the entire development cycle. Because design isn't just about how a place looks, it's about how it performs, how it adapts, how it changes, and how people engage and experience it. At its best, architecture reduces risks, accelerates delivery, strengthens brands, and unlocks long-term commercial and cultural value. Today, we explore how the right design approach can shape entire neighborhoods and why the smartest developers bring architects in much earlier than what you might think. To guide us through this, I'm joined by someone who believes design should create impact, not unnecessary complexity. Dicky Lewis, architect and co-founder of White Red. Based in Shoreditch, White Red is known for blending bold architectural ideas with a refreshingly efficient and pragmatic delivery model. Dicky's work spans master plans, mixed-use destinations, workplaces, living, hospitality, and complex urban sites. Always with a core focus on clarity of purpose and value. His philosophy is simple. Great architecture should be beautiful, buildable, and commercially intelligent. And when it's done right, it becomes one of the most transformative value levers in real estate today. So let's dive straight in. Dicky, thanks ever so much for coming on the show.
No, great to be here.
I've got a quick question at the beginning.
Sure.
As a fellow, maybe entrepreneur or madman deciding to start your own business.
Lunatic.
Lunatic. See, this is what you get. You get the white beard afterwards. What pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to reflect on it, isn't it? Because you make these decisions however many years ago, and then you just keep powering through. And I think I always assumed that everyone wanted to start their own business. So it was almost just like an assumption. And yeah, a lot of serendipity along the way, but also just I had quite a clear vision, and I feel really lucky to have had that, but also cursed. But yeah, it was really from the genesis of even studying architecture. I assumed that everybody or most people would set up their own practice. Yeah, whether that's ego, I don't know, but I'm sure it's a part of that. But I was lucky along the way to find my fellow founders and actually make it happen, as opposed to doing it alone, which wouldn't have happened.
Are there, apart from potentially personal ones, are there sort of what you could see in the market, and specifically with architectural practices, any big barriers to entry?
I think I remember always asking architects that had their own practices and entrepreneurs as well, how do you even get your first client? And I was always, that was my first question, is like, yeah, but design, but how do you get your clients?
Yeah.
Because it just felt like that's the only barrier to entry. I still believe it is, actually. You know, it all starts with revenue and sales, which is a dirty word in design, but I found that is the biggest barrier. And different ways of doing it. You either start young and just power through, or you build up a client base within a practice and then try and take them with you, which is,
no one does that.
It's a trodden path, but it's still a risky one, and you're still putting your chips in there.
How did you find your niche, or the gap in the market, or the way of doing things which sort of set you aside from or apart?
Well, that was always a struggle for me, because the first 2 or 3 years of White Red, we were just about bringing in cash flow and revenue. So, and I was always worried about closing down a revenue stream. So it took a few years for us to really realize and do a bit of self-reflection on what is our experience, what's our strengths, and we really should focus on that. So that's where we really started focus on this mix between commercial and hospitality as our focus of sector.
Yeah.
But at the time we were doing multi-unit residential schemes, lots of residential student resi, build to rent, and co-living. So we had to really make a decision to jettison that and really knuckle down, and that's where the last 4 years probably has been our focus. And I'm really glad we did, because
Mm.
we're kind of able to express ourselves authentically a bit more.
I think people who say they got it absolutely right straight at the beginning and they're not doing anything. I mean, as you said, there's a serendipity of people, but also market pivots, which kind of
Yeah.
force you into different sectors. You talk a lot about sort of the optimism of architecture or
Yeah.
within architecture. Where does the smile come
I
from? There?
I don't know. I think it is this kind of naivety and
Mm,
optimism, that we, as Joe, Jesus, and I all seem to share. You read a lot on LinkedIn and a lot about architecture and design and creative industries at the moment, and it's
mm.
very much negativity and concern. And there's lots of things
Yeah, that's true.
changing, and I think we've always had this kind of blind optimism towards that. Actually, architecture can make a massive impact to
Mm,
the world, and to cityscapes and to economies and to lives. So it is as grand as that, but it
mhm.
is this kind of optimism that we have, which keeps us going and keeps us happy and enjoying it. And I think it's been a really useful force for us to just push through and not get surrounded by that noise and what's too worried about it.
Mm.
And all three of us founders all have it at a different time. So it's been really great to kind
Your
of,
little pick me ups.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
I think that's been really important, actually, to have that variance in
Mm.
optimism at different times, and we all kind of help each other along.
If you had, and the market's been interesting,
Mm,
volatile, whatever we want to call it.
yeah.
What would you say, if any, what would have been the doubts when you sort of look at a market and go like, have we lost the formula or the mission or the vision, or what do we need to pivot and change?
Yeah, I think it is. You inevitably surround yourself with collaborators and other
Mm,
consultants. You read the news, the media. Those are the doubts that you end up having, and you start thinking
mm,
maybe it's time to pivot sector or pivot country or region. You just always doubt yourself. So I think that is just the noise of news and media that
mm,
really does bring in those doubts. But sometimes we kind of look at ourselves and you think we're not that big a company that we're economically shifting the needle. So you've got to just keep pushing on what you can change. So that's where inevitably they always creep in, but the doubts come from the external,
yeah,
the voices, and yeah, they can be corrupting, but they're also important to listen to.
yeah. You're right. I think they're. I mean, it's the kind of thing that where you could have, 100 good pieces of news during the day, and you have one negative one, and that's the
Yeah,
one that you're going to start
yeah.
scratching away at as well.
I tried to stop uh, as much as possible reading the news.
Mm,
I know it sounds like putting your head in the sand, and we do occasionally, but
mhm,
I just found it really distorting to the requirement for it.
mhm,
Obviously staying across current affairs is important, but to the extent that I was doing, I found it
mm.
really a distraction.
So
And
Sunday broadsheets now, not that.
well, no, I mean, it is you can't avoid it, but it's
No,
just
yeah,
almost having that reflection of like, let's try and avoid it
mm,
as much as possible. And if I am watching the news, then remembering, okay, this
yeah,
is not necessarily impacting what my mission is or my
what
goals
you're
are
doing, yeah,
personally. So yeah, it's really hard though.
it's tough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why some celebrities turn off their phones.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I saw actually, ironically, on the news last night about um, the Premier League managers, football managers, all
Mhm,
don't have social media anymore because of the abuse they receive.
yeah, yeah,
And they, I think it was Ruben Amorim was saying, "Well, I lose sponsorship and reach, but it's worth it for my family and the
yeah,
way to live." And I think we are. Talking about our children and
mm,
at different stages of life, it's such an interesting
yeah.
era we're in. We're all facing this barrage of social media, and we're the first ones to have done it.
But I think, and that's a really nice link back to the optimism factor and how
Mm,
you can genuinely genuinely make change through, the ecosystem and the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
There's a duality in some of the elements that we've been talking about around sort of design excellence versus or coupled with efficient processes in your approach. And then
Yeah.
they're not counterintuitive really, but how do you see them working together as well as partners in crime?
I think it's kind of the creative struggle, isn't it, really?
Mhm.
Is there's always that artist within architects that just wants to have their own way and to do the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. But that era is over. But also the commerciality of the market
Mhm.
as we're in means that there's actually something really interesting in fighting creative solutions inefficiency.
Mm.
It is a balance. It's a tightrope you have to tread. But I think that's what's been really exciting for us is to find those really inspiring moments with value engineering and to have that storytelling ability to protect a concept to the extent there where when the commercials come in and they kick in and the areas need to be improved or value engineering has to happen, you still protect some of the larger elements
The
that
core
really
aspects, yeah.
resonate with that original concept, and that's where that creative struggle, we found as a
Mm.
smaller and kind of up and coming practice, we've had to really hone that skill. But I think that's been a differentiator as well because some of the bigger names and the bigger divas can get their way, but
Yeah.
maybe at the cost of actually
I
some
was going
of.
to say, yeah.
But yeah, that's that balance.
One of our sort of as a sort of brand and creative agency, one of our main frustrations is when we're referred to as, I don't know, the web guys or the brochure
Yeah.
guys. I'm not bitter about it at all, obviously. Architects sometimes get labeled as, oh, it's the designers of buildings,
Yeah.
as opposed to as we see ourselves, and I think that's the core message behind the podcast. We all within the ecosystem can unlock that value, whatever it might be. How do you define, well, maybe it's a bit too precise, but let's start with that one. How do you define architectural value?
I mean that what you just described is obviously someone not understanding the
Mhm.
exact value, and it's even my wife says to me, "Have you been colouring in today?" And it's like, yeah, obviously that's what I do all day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Support starts at
Yeah,
home. Yeah.
yeah. But it is the classic. Architects draw it and tell contractors, "Well,
Mm.
if I've drawn it, then you can build it." But I believe that architects are problem solvers, and that's one of the most exciting parts of architecture is to represent a client or a project and a challenge, and to help them and the whole team overcome that.
Mhm.
And our skill set, our drawing and the ability to communicate that in a visual identity, I think architecture is at a really interesting time where the golden eras of kind of fixed pricing and architect as the lead consultant that did everything
Mm.
is changing, and the world's changed. So we need a lot of collaboration with other consultancies,
Mhm.
yourself included. And that's great, is to be there as one of the main stakeholders of that problem. The problem solving is where I see architecture in transition
Mhm.
into using technologies and different skills and abilities to reflect what the changing times are and work with other team members. So yeah, I see it as basically problem solving as opposed to just the guys that do the drawings.
And what in terms of problem solving, what kind of in terms of the problems to solve, environmental, social, I mean,
Yeah,
have you seen the problems to solve become bigger, more varied, or are they fundamentally always the same?
I think it probably always feels like you're in an era where it's getting worse and bigger.
Yeah.
But
It's old age.
yeah, the last few years, specifically with sustainability, it's
Mm.
been a real challenge to even understand where you stand on it and what
Mm.
your impact can be. It feels like a massive issue, a global and a world problem
Mhm.
that we need to overcome. So I would say that, I mean, I'm trying to find the words for it, but one of
Mhm.
the most important problems we face, um, and the construction has a massive impact on
A
that.
massive impact. I find that this, for lack of a better word, the sustainability, ESG as a given problem that we all need to solve, I
Yeah,
think is absolutely clear. We've found that some developers or asset managers, naming no names, have kind of been disillusioned with the potential shift in policies around this at the moment and gone like, oh, but we've been doing this for 10, 15 years. Was it really worth it? And you're kind of like, well, yeah, it kind
Yeah.
of is and still is and should be.
Yeah.
In terms of social and maybe utilization challenges of, let's dive into sort of commercial real estate, whether it's retail or offices, they've faced social challenges. How do you, when you're looking at value generation, how do you address those problems, issues, challenges,
Yeah, I think
opportunities?
what we've, I mean, our stance has been is almost to focus on what we can actually control and make
Mm,
small iterative impact on. Actually, even the project we worked on, I think 4 or 5 years ago now,
mhm,
that was one of our first ventures into, if we're putting furniture into a space, let's try and make it as low impact as possible.
mhm,
So specifying circular economy furniture, cradle to
mhm,
cradle items, which could be refurbished and reused. And we found that really rewarding. And you kind of then look at some of the bigger policy driven and accreditations. Obviously, there's a place for them, but we felt like people can row back from those. And
mhm.
you see the people like Brewdog who, are big advocates of kind of carbon capture and forestation. And then they just have rowed back on it recently.
I've
And
forgotten about it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you
Mm,
just felt like, well, it's not something we can control that, and
mm,
so we need to almost focus ourselves on the tangible things that we could do: recycled
mhm.
content, materiality, reusable furniture items, reusing old items, and having those exciting stories even within the products.
That's true.
Stuff that you can touch and the stuff you
Mhm,
can tell people about. And we found that really rewarding and have explored materials basically and have enjoyed doing that. And some projects, we can recent projects. There've been some really exciting advances in kind of
mm.
those technologies we've used on that.
And going around, sort of maybe circling back to the people who are going to be using, using your buildings or living in them or working in them.
Yeah.
Have you found, and there have been obviously, and it's well documented since, since COVID and before, social changes in the way people have interacted with buildings. How do you take those into consideration in the design process and in the value generation process?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is in commercial workspace,
Hmm.
so probably one of the most corrupted or changed sectors
Mm.
since COVID. And we were fascinated where pre-COVID we had a project working with Google,
Hmm.
and it was a very small project where they asked us to have a look at the kind of an office floor plate. They were struggling with offering massive flexibility and people working from home, but those team dynamics didn't quite work when
Hmm.
people were coming back. And it was a really interesting project to have worked pre-pandemic on because we kind of powered through the pandemic, and on the other side of it, the world of work completely changed, and the
Mm.
way that people use the office, people commute, people work from home, all of that has changed and is constantly changing. I always said it's like the trees in a ring, especially in your LinkedIn feed, where we were in 2020,
Mm.
21, 22, and now it's like everything changes constantly. So
Mhm.
you almost can't try and anticipate what the next thing is going to be. You have to design for the flexibility of where it might be as well. But yeah, it's something that we work on with both landlords and occupier, and it's been really interesting to work with both. And occupier, for example, we've just finished a project for Virgin's, their new headquarter. So working with an institution like Virgin
Mm.
and
I can imagine.
exploring their brand values and their culture has been incredible to learn from, as well as us trying to ensure we unlock
Mm.
their fulfillment for what they need their workspace to be.
And focusing on brand then, because that's obviously sort of a
Yeah.
mini stomping
Yeah,
ground.
yeah.
How do you see the relationship between you designing the product and then working, as you said, with partners designing the brand? How do you see that relationship working, and when is it the most sort of efficient or successful?
I think it's mainly when the vision is decided or is worked on from the beginning,
Mm.
and the process of storytelling continues throughout the
Mhm.
project, and it's very rare that that happens because projects are fast paced, budget
Yeah.
driven. But I believe that setting the vision from the beginning helps to set
Mhm.
the concept and to also brief the team, all of the team, all the way through, and
Yeah.
then that drives decisions as you go, as things happen. And a good example of that is a project we're nearly completing any day now, which is Filmhouse in
Mm.
Soho, and we have worked with Heinz, our client, on that project, and that was such a unique experience for us because they were keen to work with us, keen to come across to Shoreditch to our brick warehouse, show office space, and to really collaborate
Mhm.
on the concepts. And it was in those sessions, authentically was, where we cracked an idea for what the space
Mm.
should be and what the building should represent. It had a really clear history and a
Yeah.
heritage, but we worked together on the belief that this should be an oasis of wellness and a real authentic sanctuary for people within the context of Soho and the
Mhm.
hustling and the creative backgrounds to have a really calm and unique workspace. So it was amazing to have worked with the client on that.
Mhm.
And then that meant that all the way through the project, where there was inevitable challenges, it was actually the client being able to reiterate that concept and that
Bring you
belief.
back to the North
Yeah,
Star that
which is
you'd all.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think we're systematically fighting to be involved as early as possible in the process
yeah,
so everyone creates the vision, because I think it boils down to, as you're saying, that the product itself, but what amenities are offered, how are people, behaving on front desk,
yeah,
it's absolutely everything. And I think you're right. It's the earlier, as many people who can set that vision are on board,
yeah.
the better. In marketing, there are the three Ps. And I don't know if this is true. It just sounded nice. So I'll just see if it's right. In architecture, like, how do you balance beauty, budget, and buildability? Is that a thing, or is that just?
Yeah.
It is. Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think, the intersection of all three of those is where good architecture lies. And
Mm,
specifically as well with what we focus on as well, refurbishment of existing
mm,
and uncovering problems that has a strain on budget, and then buildability
mm.
as well as beauty. So yeah, I think it definitely is a good three Bs to look into, and achieving success is not just about beauty.
Mm.
It is working alongside the contractors and the other consultants to make sure that it's actually buildable. And that's, yeah, keep going back to the idea really that architecture's, I think, is about problem
It's problem
solving.
solving.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as over designed?
I think you can end up getting yourself stuck in a world of going down a rabbit hole. I always remember one of my tutors at university always used to say, "Just throw away your best idea," because it just helps to unlock your path forwards. And I
Ah,
was always quite resistant to it, but
it's an
the
interesting one.
more that
Yeah.
I move forward with working through concepts, it's actually really helpful. And the great thing that I have with Joe, my co-founder, is that him and I were at university together, really fierce rivals, best friends, but he was always
A
edging
healthy
ahead.
competition,
Healthy
or
competition, yeah,
unhealthy?
it has been. And
Yeah.
I think Joe's probably one of the most talented,
Mm.
naturally gifted designers I've ever seen. And so I kind of had to work hard just to keep up with him, and didn't manage to keep up with him. But, we brought out the best in each other, and we have these discussions and go red in the face at the moment, but never fall out.
What
And
would you disagree on then?
I think we always have slight disagreements in the design intent or design
Mm,
decisions. Even more recently, we have different tendencies as personalities, and I kind
mm,
of we're doing a project at the moment where I was convinced we needed the whole thing to be curtain and fabric and soft, and it was just trying to convince Joe, and he just wasn't convinced. And for me, there's a reason for it. As frustrating as it is, I know that even though he didn't know what he wanted, he got there in the end, and we both found this compromise, which we're both really happy with, and it's
mm.
better for the project. So
Yeah.
it's not about just steamrolling your own ego and ideas. I think that's where we work really well together.
And on that point of coming together, is there anything that kind of defines, or that when you look at successful buildings or value generating buildings, anything that they have in common, regardless of location or even asset class?
I think it's typically how well they tell the story.
Mm,
And I think that's where it does go back to, from that kind of vision and the concept to the delivery, is how well is that project able to tell the story. And when you walk in the space, when not just the kind of marketing literature, kind of
Mm.
the brochure you get, it's actually, do you sense the space has
Mm.
that story which has been identified? And I think London, we're so lucky
Yeah.
to operate in London. There's so much heritage and history and storytelling available. It's on a plate. The kind of the worst projects I see is where they almost just ram it into something. I think the
Mm.
best projects that I see across the board is where it's some subtlety to it, where it's very clear, but also it's open to imagination as well. I think some of our best projects, we did a project recently on Rathbone Street, the
Mhm.
the garage, where it was bombed in the World War II, but it was bought back in the 60s as a pretty poor office space. So we re-envisaged the identity of
What
that.
happened in the 60s?
Yeah, I mean, it was just amazing to be able
Mm.
to have that ability to say, well, we found the old 1920s photos from it, and the old advertising was painted on the facade. So we actually applied for planning permission to get one of those adverts back up, and then we reinstated the old facade in a modernized metal finish, and we actually parked a car in the front entrance as well, a Citroen SM. So it was a really fun element, but it was really important to the project as well to tell the story of that location, what the building used to be, what that part of
Mhm.
London was like, and it was part of its identity, and we really enjoyed it as well.
I completely agree, and I think the the retrofitting or is really good for that element of storytelling and sort of repositioning and different leases of life. And I think that's what I find super interesting about real estate, that buildings can have different functions, different lives, and constantly sort of, yeah, as you said, respond to problems or societal changes. In terms of Filmhouse, then maybe circling back to that project, obviously, very well known French cinema brand Pathé was there.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you start integrating that story into what it is to become very soon?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible history, and that location
Mm.
in Soho. It's amazing that every single street and alleyway has its own
Mm.
identity and story. So Wardour Street itself, had its own unique identity. So what we wanted to do first and foremost was to make sure we weren't just harking back to that specific
Mhm.
time and that British Pathé nostalgia back to the film, but to include that creativity, but not to the extent where it was almost a sickening harken back to the glory
Yeah.
days of Soho.
Or gimmicky because you're
Yeah,
pushing it too far.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we did, we were guilty of it from the beginning. You can't help yourself, but
Mhm.
kind of think, oh, it'd be quite fun to put some neon signs in the front. But
Mm.
but the reality was is we had to remember what problem we were solving. This
Mm.
was a large office
Mm.
in the middle of a creative industry location, and it had to be suitable for the modern workplace. And we really wanted to take that generational understanding of what we think workplace is going, and inject those value driven ideas that I think that this space could be a place of wellness and
Mm.
a relaxation and calmness. So that's where it really helped to drive that narrative of actually really subtle materials, a kind of honesty towards materiality. So we've got a clay pot tile wall and
Mm.
some really beautiful stone floors, timbers, accents of timbers. And then a really big move we did was, looking at where the way people would actually use the space. Wardour Street is very bustling and very
Yeah.
congested. And we had this back entrance, which was just the bin location, where the ramp down
Mm.
to the bin store. So we said, actually, why can't we use that back entrance off of Sheraton Street? It's probably the kind of least path of resistance from Dean Street entrance, which
Mhm.
which the everyday user might
Yeah.
even use. So we thought, well, why don't we open that up and make it almost a front back entrance? So that's where we drove this concept of cobblestoning that courtyard and continuing those cobblestones in, and then opening up that ground floor to lower ground with a big void and a staircase, which
Mm.
which creates a bridge going across it, which creates that honest serendipity of encounters with
Yeah.
people every day. So that it wasn't just everybody needing to pile in on the Wardour Street
On the Water
entrance.
Street
It
entrance,
was
yeah.
the everyday user would probably, hopefully, use that entrance, and it just creates this beautiful space now. And it's amazing to kind of go in there now, and the
Mm.
void is there, and the stairs open. But when we first went in the building, it wasn't there. And I know it sounds obvious, but it's almost
Ah.
like it was always meant to be there. And that was a really good example of our client understanding that concept of, that central heart of the scheme
And what it will bring.
and what it will bring. And when there was the pressures potentially of we should have more office space on the ground and lower ground. Should
Mm.
we make that back into office? It was the client that was defending that concept, and it was really brilliant to have seen that. As an architect, as a designer, to see a client defending a concept. Because
For once.
it's not because it's not ours.
Yeah.
We don't own it. We helped contribute towards it. That everyone needed to protect it. So yeah.
And you mentioned in the conversation about iteration and constant iterations to sort of improve the destinations you create. Do you go back to projects and that you've created and then do a bit of people watching and looking at how they use the space? And have you ever been surprised by going like, oh, I'd never thought they'd use it in that way, or it's really nice that it kind of validates something that you designed maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, we don't
Mm.
often get the opportunity, and when we do, it's like gold dust. And
Yeah.
we've been really lucky to on the Virgin headquarters to over that period. It was so rewarding, and we formed friendships and relationships with the team, our team, and Virgin, and now have the point where we pop in very regularly. We sometimes work from the office, and we're still in touch where we are doing day two works
Mm.
to spaces where we just didn't imagine they would turn up and to be like that. So a good example was it's the town hall area that we designed for big event spaces. That's been used so much more than we could have imagined for.
Yeah.
And then we were so glad to have worked with them so hard to design it for flexibility. Even the furniture items had everyone had the comfy test by Virgin. We worked with a furniture consultant, Dodds and Shoot, to make sure that all of the items that were selected could be sampled by the Virgin team for months, so that
Mm.
they passed the comfy tests, but they were suitable to be stored. So that it means that there's about 7 different iterations that town hall space can be, from a kind of a cafe style space to a hotel lounge space to
Mm.
a big event space. And just even that was really amazing to witness going in there now, sometimes
And
such the
seeing,
size of
yeah.
the events. And then, smaller ones, like one of the larger meeting rooms is now a podcast studio and an innovation space. And it's been really amazing to
Mm.
be on the journey from post design completion to see how it's evolved. And it's just even more incredible than when it was first completed. So yeah, we very rarely get the opportunity, but that can be really impactful for us to follow on from that.
Because it's kind of the seminal moment of, all the kind of ideas and potential objectives or challenges that you put in there, and that you see,
Yeah.
well, all the problems you've solved
Yeah, yeah.
along the way.
Yeah, and it's always a worry, isn't it, that you missed
Yeah.
something or not done it quite correctly.
Obviously, there are a lot of new buildings coming to market in London. The market is still fluid, challenged, whatever the word people use these days is. But how do you set yourself aside from the competition? Because there's a lot of things around wellness, a lot of things around sort of flexibility. How have you, in sort of partnership with the agents and the brokers who will be bringing the project to the market, how do they feed into the insight maybe, or how do they give you that commercial sort of landscape that you'll be entering into with the product?
I think as a practice, White Red, we've really orientated ourselves between this intersection of interior design and
Mm.
architecture. And we learnt the hard way through hospitality interiors and architecture that actually, what's required is so much more nuanced than
Mm.
the traditional minimalist approach which architects typically take on interiors. And I think we've managed to find a really good section of the market, which is that demand for higher quality finishes and softness and
Mm.
interiors, which really resonates with that orientation towards wellness and that kind of aesthetic that a lot of people are talking about, that hospitality
Mm.
commercials. So I think we've been lucky in a way to have almost our clients orientated towards
Yeah.
that, but we've picked up and run with it as well. And then we are really interested in the storytelling
Mm.
and brand, and that we're actually seeing that ever more increasing intersection between architecture design and brand
Mhm.
as actually the way forward.
We do same thing as you guys. We do a lot of work in the hospitality space, and also seeing. And we had a couple of weeks ago the head of design at Ennismore
Mm,
talking about how they design these spaces around their operations to create these kind of memorable experiences,
Yeah.
and that intersection between brand and how it filters through to, you know, obviously the marketing collateral, but then taps and furnishings and space plans and everything. I think
Yeah.
it's been, and that links to the clientele, you know, what are their age, how many, you know, all the amount of bedrooms and so on and so forth. So
I think
yeah.
it's almost happening the reverse as well,
Mm,
from brand to physical spaces as well, and physical objects. And for example, I think it was Uncommon who did a brand experience of in a fashion week. They created, I think it was New York Fashion Week. They created
mm,
these boots with in a rat cage, and you know there's all these kind of architectural
mm,
and object-driven brand stories, which is interesting in the advent of digital world where everyone's on their phones and looking at screens,
mm,
and kind of where billboards used to be. I think we're seeing that potentially experiential and physical brand
mm.
can is potentially on the up as well, which is really exciting as an architect
Yeah.
because we see it from the other side that actually brand and storytelling is really important in the actual design of our physical spaces.
Yeah. And I think there are people who have got that synergy really right. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done
Yeah,
where we're all sort of, you know, at the beginning singing, sorry, from the same hymn
yeah,
sheet, you know, and that everyone's vision comes to life through that North Star. In terms of sort of a couple of sort of quick fire sort of final
oh yeah.
questions, what would you say is the one sort of architectural principle that sort of developers should, or maybe they are, I don't know, should embrace or live by?
Well, I do believe, probably sitting here with
Mm,
you, is that setting the vision early
mm,
on is probably my my preference and my priority for a project. And it's sometimes probably feels like it's not necessary yet, but I always think that setting that tone, even just a small acknowledgement towards it at the beginning, can have a massive impact
yeah,
later
huge.
on. And the storytelling along the way, along the
Mhm,
journey, and we're trying to do a lot more of it now in our kind of marketing, media, and kind of content production. Is how can we tell the story along the journey? There's always NDAs and
mhm.
discretion
Yeah,
needed, but
completely.
I do think that there's a massive demand for how we can set the vision and what the impact that can have. And I just think developers needs to get better at doing that instead of just the day when it ends, just rushing around pulling together marketing material to try and lease it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. So
We would say that,
listen,
but
listen to this. Um, you must see a lot of buildings, and obviously, sort of, you know, sort of look at different buildings across the world. Is there one or two that you would say like, oh, like I wish I designed that one,
I
or
mean, there's loads.
yeah,
I think that yeah, it's always hard to. It's like your favorite band, I guess, isn't it?
yeah,
Almost, or
it's a
your
bit that
favorite
question.
album.
Yeah.
But there's one for me that almost resonates where I used to work at Foster and Partners,
Hmm.
and thinking about studying architecture was off of the back of seeing the Gherkin being built in
Mm,
London on that skyline and seeing that impact it had on me
yeah.
as a 16-year-old or 15-year-old. It's been like, wow, this is incredible. The London's changing. So when I got the opportunity to work at Foster's, it was a dream come true. But looking back to before I even studied architecture, the Reichstag in
Hmm.
Berlin. I think for me, I love history, I love heritage, I love the story behind
Yeah.
even just the competition of it, and
Yeah.
then the final result, the way that it's influenced people, the economies, the impact that project had. And I think that just is the epitome for me of architecture. And I don't think necessarily there are projects like that nowadays.
Mm.
And Joe and I always joke about our Guggenheim moment, and I think that Bilbao Guggenheim, that project. Imagine being that playful and having that kind of fun. You
Yeah,
know.
we went on, and I recommend it to everyone, like the Barbican
Oh yeah,
architectural
yeah. I've
tour.
done it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
and just that like just crazy journey where you're just like, but nowadays that would never happen. And there was one other which I could also like vividly recommend is the Sandcastle in Amsterdam, which used to be the
Okay.
old headquarters of ING, which is
Yeah.
like the most insane. It's a bit of a Barbican, but it's
Mm.
insane, crazy. It's got light wells, which at one time of the year, it's a bit Indiana Jonesy. The sun comes in and it shoots across another atrium, and it's just, And you just look at it, and I agree with you. I don't know, that bliss, that creativity, that sheer freedom of creating something, which is still today like an amazing destination. But
Yeah.
just knowing that, yeah, let's just go for it. It's a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Barbican, my wife always teases me. She thinks I'm obsessed with concrete, but that opportunity to go and see the different chiseledness of the samples they were testing, and I've always looked at the Barbican. Things like if you look at the power sockets, they're actually all chiseled out of the concrete, and they're all designed bespokely for the Barbican. And you can look at the Barbican as a massive master plan, but that attention to detail is incredible, and that want for the aesthetic to correlate with from the power socket and light switch up to the tower. That's where I think those principles are really interesting and should be tried to, however big or small the project, that's what it really interests me.
Well, I think,
It's difficult to do these days.
Difficult. Yeah, I mean, they're not. I don't know. We're currently working on a project with Lend Lease Birmingham City Council on Dover House, which is the whole of Smithfield Market, and that is one of those big sort of central city master plans. So it'll be interesting to see. And at the moment we're integrated quite early, so hopefully the vision will continue. If you were to sort of leave us with a prediction, what would you say the most valued or valuable element of architecture is going to be, and working with architects is going to be in the coming years?
I really think it is that storytelling ability. We have, I'm sure you've talked a lot about AI and the advent of it. And what we're going to be seeing is a lot of advancement in technologies and the ability to automate processes which, are more mundane. But I do think that creativity, the human creativity of the ability to tell the story of a project, I think, and then use that to be able to solve problems is the uniqueness that architecture needs to uphold. And so I think that that's going to become ever more important.
More important, yeah.
And whilst we lean into using technologies, we don't fight them. We actually use them for the elements that we don't want to do.
The right bits.
Yeah, we didn't study or venture into architecture to do Revit, to do CAD. We didn't necessarily. And some people like it, but there is elements that you kind of forget what we even did it for. So I think that it's that, going back all the way back to when I was looking at the Gherkin being built and the impact it had and what it made me feel and resonated with me, and to the story of the Reichstag and all those beautiful projects.
They're deeply human.
They're deeply human, and they are part of our story, our narrative, and they're all a story. So I think it's something, I don't know what, but the prediction is leading into how does brand, narrative, vision, and storytelling jumble up into architecture as we know it, and that's what I'm pointing my nose towards.
Let's work together.
Yeah.
Dicky, thanks ever so much. It's been absolutely full of insights and a very passionate defense of both our jobs, it would seem. But thanks ever so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Bricks and More. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague or friend who would appreciate it. If you're not already, connect with me on LinkedIn, whether to say hello or discuss a destination, real estate, or hospitality project of your own. Finally, please rate the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, share the episode, connect with me on LinkedIn, and rate the podcast. I'm Adrian Strittmatter, and I'll be back soon with the next episode.